Dave Reed, Ryan Wilkinson, and Joey Gallo.
Welcome in to the NSFW Dynasty podcast. We are back. I am your host, Dave Reed, joined by my co-host, Ryan Wilkinson and Joey Gallo. Week 1, baby, in the books. How you guys feeling?
Week 1 in the books, coming to you guys on a Friday night. Excited about the weekend. We already have a game behind us in week 2. Excited to talk football.
Yeah, a little later in the week than usual, but it's not a bad thing. A lot of football to talk about, and it's the weekend.
That's right. I know. Getting the Thursday night game in, it's like cheating a little bit. We have a little bit more data to be playing off of than we typically after week 1, but all good things. Definitely an interesting game last night. I'm sure we'll be getting into it. I'll be going through the injury roundup. Unfortunate, there was a pretty big one there. But how are you guys feeling after week 1? How did you spend your first week of football viewing?
Yeah, so I was in Cincinnati for a bachelor party. Attended Bengals Patriots. It was a tough game for the home crowd. It was a tough game for all of us who were rooting for the home team and had many of our wagers on the home team players. But great experience. It's a great tailgating environment outside of I'm going to call it Paul Brown Stadium, even though it's technically Paycor Stadium now. It'll always be Paul Brown Stadium. There's people out there tailgating, but there's like a stretch of bars that are in between the Great American Ballpark and Paul Brown. And then there's like open carry in the street, so you're kind of just like it's like just like a big street. There's music playing, and people are outside drinking, and it's a good vibe. So the pregame was great, and the game itself was fun, and I'm sure we'll talk about it because the Bengals might stink. But yeah, it was a nice week 1. Aside from that, the bets went pretty well. Fantasy went decently well. Not this league, unfortunately, but it was a good week 1. Can't complain.
I didn't have as good of a weekend as Joe. I was watching from home, but I did watch most of the Bengals Cardinals or Bills Cardinals game, which had a lot of fantasy implications for Joe and I's matchup. So it was a good week 1 in terms of fantasy.
Yeah, I had a pretty good week in fantasy as well, solid in bets as well. Just watched it all from home. But I will say, side note, any city that has like the open carry rules and anywhere, it's like the best. It's always a great time. I don't know why they can't figure out more places to do that. And so it's a good way to get the community together.
Yeah, it's the vibe outside, like MetLife or one of these stadiums where it's like a true traditional tailgating situation is very unique and unmatched. But it's also nice to know that you don't have to have a tailgate lined up and you can just go there and walk right up to the party.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, jumping into it, there were some downsides on the week 1 and a little bit last night too, as I aforementioned. There were some injuries that we got to deal with, and that's part of the game. So just going to run through some of them real quick, some of the big ones. At quarterback, Jordan Love looked real bad initially, but it turned out to just be an MCL sprain. He's going to avoid the IR, but it could be about 3 weeks that he's out. Russell Wilson, he missed week 1 with a calf issue, and looks like he's going to miss week 2 as well. So Justin Fields is going to start last week, and he's going to start again this week. And last night on Thursday Night Football, Tua got another concussion. Scary. You don't even care about football anymore for this guy. You just want to make sure that he's making the best choice for himself and his family. But definitely going to be out quite some time for that team. A lot of ramifications there. At running back, CMC missed week 1. He was doubtful leading into this pod for week 2. He's now definitely missing week 2, and actually might go on the IR with an Achilles tendonitis. So Jordan Mason stepping up, but that is something that is just breaking down and is just ruining tons of teams up in Dynasty and redraft. Raheem Mostert before the game last night, he was actually ruled out with a chest. Achan had an ankle injury, but ended up playing. It was a game time decision and had more touches than he's ever had in his career. But Jeff Wilson in the game also got hurt. So right now you're only looking at Achan and Jalen Wright for the Dolphins. And then Kenneth Walker has an abdomen issue, and looks like he's doubtful for this week. So something to monitor there. At wide receiver, Puka Nakua had a PCL sprain. He was dealing with this in the offseason. He re-aggravated it. He hit the IR, and he may miss even more than just the 4 games required by the IR. Jordan Addison has actually been ruled out for week 2 with his ankle. Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze are both looking probably unlikely for this week. Keenan Allen, I think, is undisclosed, but he's questionable. And Rome Odunze has an MCL sprain, so something to keep an eye on there for an exciting rookie. Marquise Hollywood Brown, it seemed like he was going to be coming back this week, and then all of a sudden he just had surgery and he's on IR. And it's sounding like from Matthew Betts, who does a lot of the injury work for the Dynasty football, says it's going to be like a 12-week recovery. So he actually just might be done for your fantasy
Pro
season.
Football Doc too.
Yeah, so that's pretty.
Bueno.
Yeah, they didn't like talk about it in any other tweets except these other medical guys are like, yeah, that's like not a small surgery. So he's potentially done for the year, at least for fantasy. Josh Downs has a high ankle sprain, missed week 1, but might be back this week. T. Higgins, hamstring, because that's what T. Higgins does. He missed week 1, probably going to miss week 2. We'll see how that goes. DeAndre Hopkins is playing, but he has like a dealing with MCL tear and playing still, so don't really know how that's going to go. And then at tight end, you got David Njoku, who has an ankle sprain, already been ruled out for week 2. Jake Ferguson is like the weirdest thing to me. First of all, Sleeper told us 100 times he was questionable. It looked like he may have tore his ACL. Turned out to just be an MCL sprain and a bone bruise. Thought he was going to miss time. Now he actually might play this week, so he's still questionable, but you got to keep an eye on that. But it's very strange that he went from potentially missing the season to potentially playing this week. But which of these injuries to you guys are standing out, or do you think have the biggest impacts for the team? Any potential adjacent players that are on those teams that rely on them? Which ones stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, my take on Jordan Love vaulting into the top 5 Dynasty QBs is off to a rough start, but hopefully he does come back. It was nice to see that he's not going to go on the IR and could potentially be back in 3 weeks. I feel like there's been a lot of just sort of up in the air, unexpected injuries, though. Like CMC was going to play week 1. Now all of a sudden he might go on IR. You know, you mentioned Hollywood Brown. He was same thing. Seemed like he was going to play, and now all of a sudden he's on IR. And definitely some big names. You know, obviously Tua last night, huge implications, not just for fantasy, but for that team in general. So a lot of big injuries already after week 1. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, from a quarterback standpoint, Russ sticks out to me. We did kind of Dynasty risers and fallers in a recent podcast episode, and I had the thought of throwing out Justin Fields, and eventually was too much of a coward to do it, and I threw out Christian Watson instead. And I regret it because, frankly, Justin Fields, while he's never going to be, it seems, a great real-life quarterback, he is a solid fantasy quarterback, and right now he's got great opportunity. If they win again this week, do they go back to Russ? This is like just the opportunity that he needed. And I feel like you could have probably gotten him in the offseason for pennies on the dollar, even in a super flex. And, you could end up having a league winner if he ends up holding the starting job all season. So at the wide receiver position, just a shout out to Jordan Addison for having a high ankle sprain on both ankles at the exact same time. In all of my time following football, I don't know that I can recall a situation where this has ever happened, but he had a high ankle sprain that he was still recovering from, and then he high ankle sprained the other ankle. So, and then Hollywood, just a sigh, in the off season. Obviously, everyone listening to this podcast knows I traded Stafford for Hollywood. And the original offer was Josh Downs for Stafford, and I poo-pooed on that one, insisted on Hollywood. And, ever since then, I just have regretted it. The hype train for Josh Downs has picked up a little, and the offense looks good. And, once he's back out there, hopefully this week, I get the feeling that he's going to be the one catching some of those bombs from Anthony Richardson. So a little bit of buyer's remorse there for me personally, but you can't win them all.
Can still go get them. Who has
you got to take your L's when they're presented in front of you, and this is looking like it's going to be an L.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict injuries too. Like, you make the trade, you can't predict the injury and hope that
Yeah.
happens. It's just bad luck. You didn't make a bad move. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah. You win some and you lose some.
Yeah, I mean the quarterbacks have big implications too. Obviously, Skylar Thompson cannot be the answer. Like the team will just not run like the wide receivers. Like Waddle, I don't really know if you can use Waddle until you get like a
You
real.
can't start him if
Can't start
that's the
him.
quarterback.
You could
No.
barely start Waddle when Tua was out there. If we're being
Yeah.
honest, it was not a good start to the season for
At
Waddle.
all.
No.
Yeah, it wasn't a great finish either
Yeah.
last year. And
Yeah.
Tyreek, you'll still be fine because he has the game breaking ability, but you got to kind of lower your expectations a bit until they get someone who can throw the ball downfield a bit more because Skyler is not doing that at all. So that one has like I think the widest impact on like top tier talent. So that one definitely sticks out to me. Puka's interesting just because it raises a lot of other people's value. Where like Tua going down lowers a ton of people's value. Puka leaving, and we want Puka back, but Cooper looks like wide receiver one every week in week out. Like he's old, but like if you're in Dynasty and you you still need to win now, and like that's a huge asset. And then you get Demarcus Robinson and who's Tyler Johnson as well, Joey's favorite player. That are like these guys are fantasy relevant. Like that, if you're in a deep league like us with 3 flexes on top of 2 wide receivers and run backs, those are usable assets now that like you may not have had before.
I mean, Cooper Kupp got 21 targets.
Yeah.
That's literally insane. So yeah, Cooper Kupp, I think, is the biggest beneficiary there. He's a clear wide receiver one now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and although we don't mention it here because they're not position guys, it is worth mentioning that the Rams had like 4 injuries to their starting offensive line. So I will be curious to see. I don't know that it'll matter this week because Arizona's defense is not good at all, and they didn't get much of a pass rush last week. I doubt they're going to get much of a pass rush this week, but we'll see. I mean, frankly, if Arizona is in Matt Stafford's shorts the entire game, then I think that'll mean not so great things for the team as long as they are without, again, literally 4 offensive line starters.
It was crazy because it all happened in the game basically.
Yeah.
Like every play another guy dropped. I've never seen anything like it.
Yep.
But that was some of the injuries that you got to be taken care of. But also going into the season, it's the first time we got a real glimpse of rookies in real live action. So Ryan, why don't you take it away with our new segment?
Yeah, so we're going to do a little something I'm calling Ryan's Rookie Roundup here, where we're just going to go through all the rookies that were picked at the top of our rookie draft. And I just want to kind of get your guys' gut take on, would you still pick them where they went? Are you a little more nervous than you were before we saw them week 1? And just kind of how you're feeling. I feel like it was a bit of an up and down week 1 for a lot of the rookies. So we'll start at the top. Pick number 1 was Caleb Williams. Completed 14 of 29 passes for 93 yards. Somehow the Bears did still win the game. He did also run 5 times for 15 yards, but gut check there. You still 100% taking him pick number 1 overall in a rookie draft, or are you a little more worried than you would have been?
I would probably still take him 1 in a super flex. Partially because we have the slightest shroud of a doubt about Marvin Harrison after he stunk it up week 1 as well. That's really the biggest factor. But for Caleb, so when Patrick Mahomes was being scouted coming out of Texas Tech, it was like his outside the pocket abilities, similar to Caleb's, were never in question. And it was more so, would he be able to be a productive NFL pocket passer? And it turns out he's one of the best of all time at throwing from the pocket. So obviously things worked out. Caleb, I think the verdict is still very, very clearly out on whether or not he can throw from the pocket. And a lot of the highlights that he had in the preseason were outside the pocket against, second and third string defense. So I'm not especially concerned. It was his first start. But, I think that moving forward, I'll be looking intently to see if he can demonstrate that he can make passes from the pocket.
Yeah, I'm still taking him, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on it to Joey's point because even with the preseason, the one thing you did see too, outside of the crazy highlights you saw, he actually was not very good in preseason. He had and it just kind of carried over. He's playing that like backyard football, so he has to change how he plays the game basically in the NFL. But it's early in his career. He's crazy talented. You see it there. You just got to kind of change how he views the game and decision making, which I think is the easier thing to change. So I'd still probably take him, but there's definitely a touch more concern than I would have 4 months ago, where I thought it was slam dunk.
Yeah, I agree. I think Superflex, he still goes number one. And I think to Joe's point, we're going to talk about pick number two here. If Marvin Harrison Jr. had an insane game, you'd maybe be questioning it a little more. But Marvin Harrison Jr. caught one of three targets for 4 yards in his opener. And I was watching that game. He was wide open on his first target, hit him right in the hands, and he dropped it. Maybe some first game jitters. He was also wide open at the end of the game, and Murray actually didn't see him. If he had, it would have been a deep touchdown. So there's definitely some value there, and you assume it's going to turn around. But how are we feeling about him after week one?
I'm definitely more concerned. There's honestly, I may go Neighbors over Marvin Harrison at this point, just because it wasn't just that his stat line was bad. He only had like 3 targets. Uh, his target share amongst rookies is one of the lowest that you've ever seen of anyone drafted that high. And usually, if you draft someone 4 overall, the team is going to force feed you the ball. But also, he didn't look very good. Again, some of it may be that he wasn't comfortable yet, or he was a little unsettled. So I'm not making pure judgment on it, but when you've seen the whole drumbeat for Neighbors, and I'm sure we'll get into Neighbors in the next talk, all off season, and then you see how explosive and that he's just constantly open, starts making me think that maybe Neighbors at the NFL level could potentially be a higher upside pick. That I would, granted, worse offense. I'm sure we'll touch upon it too, but just as a pure talent, Neighbors might be a potential better wide receiver than Harrison at the NFL level. But I'm still not making too many judgments. I still think he's fine at pick two. I wouldn't fault anyone going Neighbors over him. That's kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah, I'm willing to just crumple it up and toss it in the bin. I think that I'm willing to at least for one game give him a pass. I think it's a little bit tough to come in with such high expectations and to you're not immune to hearing this bust proof dialogue in the media from a football NFL perspective, from a fantasy perspective. He hears that stuff. There's some weird quotes coming out of the team where Kyler's like, it's not my job to get him the ball. It kind of is your job to get him the ball.
Literally the only job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who else is getting him the ball?
Yeah. He had a drop on his first pass. He's not a guy who's known for drops. I don't think that all of a sudden he just acquired the drops from getting. So my take is we'll talk later in the gambling section about over-unders. There's a lot of juice on his over 4.5 receptions this week, and it might honestly be juice that I'm willing to drink because I do think they're going to get him the ball, and I think he'll have a big week, and this will be the last time we have concerns about him.
I hope so, because if he has a bad week too, then you start getting concerned again. But the only thing, I don't know, we're moving through this quick, but Marvin Harrison, did you guys get a lot? I felt like I didn't get a lot of highlights out of him in the preseason, where other wide receivers got him all the time. I don't know why the Cards just don't seem to be pumping up their rookie, because the highlights are coming from the team. I felt like they were not pushing it forward. It's just weird to me. I don't really get what's going on in Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, you don't draft a guy that high to give him 3 targets a game. So I think we got to see these next couple of games. If it doesn't turn around soon here, I'm sure people will be pushing the panic button. But it's one game. He's a rookie.
Yeah, and what we heard out of camp, although it wasn't highlights from preseason, was all super gushing positivity. He's basically a veteran presence in the locker room already, and he looks great, and his fundamentals are unbelievable. And so, yeah, I'm still in. I think if you can buy low in a redraft, I think now is a pretty decent opportunity to try to do that.
Yep.
But Like if you could trade Malik Neighbors in redraft for Marvin Harrison, I think that's a decent look because I think that Arizona's offense is going to be significantly better, and the rising tide raises all ships, I guess is what they say. But yeah, I just yeah, I still would rather have Harrison than Neighbors, specifically in redraft, but I think in Dynasty also.
Yeah, well, Neighbors was pick 3. He caught 5 passes for 66 yards. Problem with him is obviously that he's tied to Daniel Jones for now, who, stinks. And I know we have some Giants fans on here. So, Dave, you mentioned it a little bit that maybe you'd consider him over Harrison Jr. now, but
You're going to
what are
hear a
your
lot of
thoughts?
Neighbors on this pod, just as like a heads up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of segments where he pops up again. Uh, I'm all in on Neighbors. I think he's going to be an absolute star. Honestly, if you put Neighbors on the Cardinals, forget about it. This guy is like dominating. It's the only thing holding him back is a quarterback. This guy is unbelievable. So, and like everyone, literally, I don't think there's ever been anyone who said anything less than this guy is like another like level of athlete. Like he's just insane. So, yeah, I'm excited for him. I think at 3, that is his floor for me as a pick. I would not let him go beyond that.
Yeah, no, I agree. He looked awesome. We'll be on his receiving this week. Was heavy on his receiving last week. It was my biggest bet of the week. Me and Canelos from the old Natty laid a hammer on him, and it came through. And we'll be going back to the well this week against the terrible Commanders.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hear a lot about Neighbors on this podcast. But pick 4, Jaden Daniels, 17 of 24 passing attempts, 184 yards. He did rush the ball 16 times for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. The team lost. Almost reminded me a little bit of Justin Fields, who didn't look that great as a passer, but obviously from a fantasy perspective, just an insane rushing upside. I worry that he's more of a rushing threat than a real NFL QB like we've seen with Fields, and we've seen that sometimes those guys don't last too long. Joe, obviously, curious to hear what your thoughts are on him.
I liked how he looked. I love the usage. I love that he ran for 2 touchdowns. I hated the commentary from the coaching staff after the game. It sounded like there was a quote that was like, "Yeah, we'd love to see him hang in the pocket longer and be more of a pocket passer." I think they were. I don't want to say displeased, but didn't necessarily love that he took off as quickly as he did. And I don't know if it's because they view this year as like a redshirt year for him in terms of like the team sucks, they're not doing anything, so they don't want to see him run as much because it's not worth it for him to get injured. Diving head first for a win when you're 2-9. But I think like you said, right, like the value he's going to bring for fantasy is with his legs. The passing was all right too. I'm excited to see what he does this week against the Giants defense, because the Giants defense is also not good. And, if he looks good from the pocket and he throws for a touchdown or 2, that would be encouraging.
Yeah. I mean, for fantasy, he's a start. Like, this is what you're drafting for. The rushing upside's a cheat code. I haven't been redrafting. I'm very, very excited about it. His passing could have definitely been better. Like, Terry McLaurin did nothing, but he's known for his deep ball, so I feel like they'll get it together. The coach commentary that I feel like come where it came from is that once he decided to like move out of the pocket, he was not looking down. He was just running, and like that's the only thing. Like you want to at least keep your head up, and like so like the defense thinks that you're going to throw, and then like something's going to open up. He is literally only running, and that is something you just got to change. So I think if you change that, stay in it. Like you can run when it's there, but like he would go, and the quick is like, nah, I'm just going to my feet. That's not a winning formula long term, typically, but for fantasy, slam dunk guy right here.
Yeah, no, I know. For fantasy, it looked unreal, so we'll see how that plays out. Pick 5 in our draft was actually Brock Bowers. He caught 6 balls on 8 targets for 58 yards. He did lead the Raiders in both targets and receptions. Not too crazy of a game, but 8 targets, obviously really good to see from week 1. Are you still taking him at pick 5, though?
Yeah.
Tight end premium, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he for the first game for a rookie tight end, that is great usage. I think he had more targets than Devontae Adams. Like
Yeah,
I
he
mean,
led the team.
and like you heard this in the offseason, and he is different. He looks like he is one of the next elite tight ends out there. So I know it was a potentially risky pick because it's Minshew and the Raiders and whatever, but he looks legit. So like in the tight end premium, I'm okay with this pick actually.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I was in retrospect, right? Like we talked about um, in the moment, and this is why Dynasty and fantasy football in general is so crazy. Like, you know, getting Odunze at pick 7 for me was value, and I was excited about it. But Odunze obviously has a little bit of a ways to go, and uh, Brock Bowers hit the ground running big time week 1. So while we probably gave the Clarks a little bit of shit for that pick at the time, it looks after 1 week.
Yeah,
Yeah, it looks like it was a solid choice. So
Yeah, and
in
8 targets.
retrospect, yeah, you
That's
can't.
all you can ask for.
Yeah, no, solid.
Pick 6 was JJ McCarthy. We'll obviously skip him for now,
I
but
will say though, I obviously pick six
yeah,
things, but the fact that Darnold looks as good with the weapons in that offense makes me feel more confident in what JJ McCarthy will look like next year potentially. So
Yeah, and he was throwing some dimes in the
it
preseason.
was so
So
like I have a rosier outlook for him than I did.
again, looking back, you could make the case for McCarthy over Odunze here too in Superflex, just based upon that one game.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, pick 7 obviously was Odunze. He caught only one of his 4 targets for 11 yards. He's tied to Caleb Williams, which was something we were all excited about. We obviously talked about Caleb Williams not having the best week 1. How are we feeling about him, and would you start him in week 2?
no, if he plays, first of all.
If he plays,
yeah,
and he's week to week, true.
yeah. If Keenan doesn't play, I would definitely and Odunze was active, I would definitely start him. Um, I'm still excited and optimistic. It was one game, and like I said earlier, like I'm still like in on Caleb Williams. I think that he is a great wide receiver, and great wide receivers generally find a way to be productive. So I have if we're talking about like would you still make the same pick at the time, right? Pick 7, I took him. Pick 8 was Xavier Worthy. That's probably the one that you would think there would be a little bit of a question, right? Do you take Worthy here? Do you take Odunze? I'm still going Odunze if I have this pick.
Yeah, I agree. I'd still make the pick here. Like it's one game going forward. You love the talent. He's still to me the wide receiver 3 in this rookie class. So I agree. Obviously, small sample size. Do you expect to take a little bit longer with him? You knew that when you were drafting him based on the team that he went to in the wide receiver room. But I just hope that this injury thing is a one-off thing that he is okay with and doesn't affect him going forward. I don't have any reason to think it will, but that to me is the only. If there was a concern, that would be it. But I'm still taking him here.
Yeah. And pick 8, Xavier Worthy. I think this is a really interesting one. He's had a lot of hype and a lot of headlines after week 1. He caught 2 of his 3 targets for 47 yards and a touchdown and added a 21-yard rushing touchdown. He only touched the ball 3 times, but scored twice. I feel like he's being overhyped a little bit after that game just because he scored the 2 touchdowns. Again, he only touched the ball 3 times. Real curious to see how you guys feel, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I don't know that he's the type of guy who needs to touch the ball a lot, and I think that's where his value or like the hype is coming from right now. Like he's so effing fast, like fastest 40 time in the combine history, and in that offense, I just feel like it's a Tyreek situation where if he gets the ball with a little space and a head of steam, whether it's a rush or a pass or what, it's going to be an explosive play. So, um, yeah, I mean, there were comps to like the Chiefs drafting McCole Hardman to replace Tyreek, and like but like he already in one game looks better than McCole Hardman ever looked in his whole career. So I get the hype and the excitement, and I definitely would choose him here if we could go back and do it again. So props to us, credit to us. We're through 8 picks, and I don't know that we'd go back and really change any. So, yeah.
I think this group, like the next few wide receivers, I don't think that any you could go wrong with the next grouping. I think they're all fine. I personally would probably pick one other wide receiver before Worthy, just on personal preference for someone who I think could be more of a target earner than Worthy, which has more consistency. Worthy, I think Worthy's a little bit of fool's gold. Like I would trade him right now if I could, based on the hype going forward.
Even with Hollywood going to the IR?
Yeah, I mean that definitely helps his case,
That's
but
how.
I think his value is just so high because of the hype from preseason, and he scored 2 touchdowns. But when you break it down, he had one was a rushing touchdown, which yes, he's going to be used in that, and he had like a convoy of blockers that completely caught the defense off guard. But to his credit, other players probably are not getting in there because they're not as fast as him. So it's not that he didn't do anything, but that does
Number
help.
1 ranked scoring defense from last year too. So
But that's not That's not something that will happen every week. That's like a one-off when you catch the defense in an off position. But then, for me, it's the receiving game, which he's a wide receiver. He wasn't involved at all, really. He had 1 catch for 12 yards, and then the touchdown for 35 yards. No, he wasn't covered from the line of scrimmage. Like it wasn't that he was fast. And no skill was on there. That the corner thought that he had safety help and just like chipped him and let him go behind him, and Worthy just stood there, and Mahomes is going to see every open wide receiver. So to me, that touchdown had nothing to do with skill, and he wasn't getting targets anywhere else. He had like I think one other couple targets he got knocked down because he was going up against bigger guys. So I still have reservations about his ability as an actual wide receiver versus like a gadget player. But to your point, like when he is schemed in, it's typically for big plays. But we'll get to him in a couple picks, but I would personally go for a wide receiver at this pick, who I think could be a true number one, who is going to earn anywhere from like 8 to 12 targets a game at some point.
yeah, I think I know who that is. It's a guy tied to a Dookie quarterback.
Let me get there. I will say I'm a little more on Dave's side on this. I feel like the hype is pretty crazy for a guy who only touched the ball 3 times. To Joe's point, Hollywood Brown going down might change that, but we'll see. Pick 9 was Drake May. We'll obviously reserve our thoughts on him for now with Brissett being named the starter. Seems like we may see him sooner rather than later anyways. Pick 10, I think this is where Dave was going here. Brian Thomas Jr. Caught all 4 of his targets for 47 yards and a touchdown. Lawrence only completed 12 passes in the game.
There's the Dookie right there.
that's the shout out for Joe. But Dave, why don't we start with you on this one?
First of all, they were running plenty. But I think Brian Thomas Jr., like you were getting a lot of hype in the preseason. He was blowing past defenders. And in this game, he was doing just that. He had an awesome, unbelievable touchdown. And it was an incredible throw by Lawrence, too. Yeah, when he threw and where Thomas was at the time, like, beautiful touch. You already saw it. He is the one in this offense. And this is what this offense hasn't had. This is what they thought Ridley would hopefully be last year, was a true alpha number one who can get down and take the top off the defense. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. could end up being someone who's consistently getting 8+ targets a game going forward. Obviously, he only started off getting 4 targets, but he caught his targets, all of them. And I think there's a lot more to come from this guy. So this is who I would take personally before Worthy, because I think his ceiling is higher and the consistency and his floor from a consistency point is higher.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously biased as that was my pick, but I hope what Dave's saying comes true.
Try to get him all off season, and then I'm never going to get him after week 1. And it's like, damn it.
Yeah. No, he looked awesome.
I
can't actually disagree with any of that. Yeah, it's just I prefer Worthy just from he's tied to Mahomes. That if it was any other circumstance for Worthy, he was on maybe any other team in the league except for maybe Buffalo, where is probably the other place he would be if he was not in Kansas City. Any other team, I would prefer Brian Thomas. Just
I will say, I don't think there's been a bust pick yet. So I don't think there's been a bad pick so far.
Pick 11 was Jonathan Brooks. We will reserve our thoughts here as well, as he's missing the first 4 games. Pick 12, Lad McConkey. He caught 5 of 7 targets for 39 yards and a touchdown. So pretty good week 1 for him. He led the team in receptions, yards, and targets, which is obviously an excellent sign for fantasy purposes. I think there was some thought going into this season that, who else is going to catch the ball there? So maybe he was kind of a sneaky pick. So how are we feeling after week 1?
Yeah, there was hype in the early offseason and in fantasy and dynasty circles. And then it kind of cooled off a little bit. Justin Herbert, you found out was going to be hurt. McConkey actually got injured a little bit. But it was actually nice to see him have the game that he did week 1. I took him maybe earlier than consensus, maybe even ahead of definitely ahead of Brian Thomas in a redraft league that I'm in with Dave.
It was actually pretty early. I was shocked. But
yeah, in the same round. And this was kind of what I was hoping for, was a scenario where Josh Palmer, but Josh Palmer's been on the field for several years and hasn't really been able to distinguish himself as a true top tier
out of the game.
Yeah. And so, I drafted McConkey and had him on the bench in that league and was figuring I would wait to see, and I was pleased with what I saw. So I think that what was expected or hoped of him early in the offseason looked like it was coming through.
Yeah, I like him too. I think he's a tier below the previous wide receiver we talked about. I don't think he has the same level of upside, but he's definitely, I think he's on his way and already shows to be the number 1 wide receiver. It's just that you're getting 7 targets for 5 yards. He got a touchdown, but only 39 yards. I don't think you're going to typically get too many massive yardage games out of him. That's the only thing I think that caps it. He's playing a little bit more in the short area, but he gets open and
I think what you're kind of hoping for is what the hell was his name? Julian Edelman type guy, where Edelman was great for fantasy without too many explosive plays.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably his ceiling. But yeah, that's kind of what I was hoping for.
Yeah, no, he definitely looked good in week 1. Pick 13 was Trey Benson. He rushed 3 times for 13 yards and caught his only target for 5 yards. Very clear number 2 back behind James Conner for now. How are we feeling there?
Relative to the other guys that went after him, I think so what I would have said after week 1 is Keon Coleman here probably. But Keon pulled a nice disappearing act in week 2 last night, which was unfortunate. Depending on team need, really, if you're kind of shallow at running back and running like you said, he's a backup, and we're not really going to be able to know, what he really is until he gets the opportunity. So, I mean, almost 5 yards a carry on 3 carries. That's pretty solid.
Yeah, I didn't think he looked bad. He just wasn't really used that much. And James Conner was the offense.
He was really good. Yeah,
James Conner was great. He was the reason that they almost beat the Bills. But I will say, as a receiver for Trey Benson, he was better than Marvin Harrison in week 1.
Yeah,
same amount of catches, 1 more yard. So,
very good point. Pick 14 was Bo Nix. He completed 26 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns, added 35 yards on the ground and a score. He did also throw 2 interceptions, and if you were watching the game, could have easily threw another 2-3 interceptions. So kind of an all over the place debut for him. Feel like, there were definitely some positives, and then, maybe the interceptions were more kind of just first game rookie type mistakes. But what'd you guys think?
Me or you, Dave?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. He is basically the same guy who was in college. He can throw in the short area. He's a starting quarterback, though, in an offense that I think there'll be more upside in the future. So from this pick, I don't think it's a bad pick for a super flex league. But I don't see a huge ceiling for him until he can start throwing downfield. I think all his throws were under 10 yards, and he threw – I forgot what the stat was, but he threw 12 passes, I think, over 10 yards, and 4 of them, I think, was caught, but 2 of them were caught by the defense. So not really good throwing down the field. And so if you're only going to throw less than 10 yards, you're not going to have great days here and there. So fine pick here, but yeah, I'm not overly excited right now.
Yeah, I mean, 26 completions for 130 yards is about 5 yards of completion. So
Exactly who he is.
not what you're looking for.
Giving him the benefit of the doubt. On the road at Seattle, first start, tough environment. Unfortunately for me, he did lead a drive down the field to get in the back door. So, like that counts for something,
Yeah.
So
He's a
he rushed for a touchdown. So I'm fine with the pick, and I actually think he'll be a perfectly fine fantasy quarterback, and maybe a nice middling, not really going to do much for you, but 500 at best NFL quarterback.
Yeah. So pick 15, Joe mentioned him. We got a little foresight here. We get to see week 2 already for Keon Coleman. Week 1, you were feeling pretty good. He caught 4 or 5 targets for 51 yards in the Bills win. And then he followed it up in week 2 with 0 catches. I think he had 1 target and just pulled a complete disappearing act. The Bills, I think that's sometimes the concern. Josh Allen likes to run. Yesterday was actually James Cook really doing a lot of the running, but it seems like there's going to be more rushing than passing on that offense this year. And so Keon Coleman, to me, his stock has taken a little bit of a hit.
Yeah, this was kind of the book on him coming out of college, that he disappears here and there. And yeah, like you just said, in this offense, I think it'll be the same.
Yeah, it's kind of like Joe said. He did this a little bit in college. He was inconsistent. He makes highlight plays here and there, but he's also on a team where it's hard to even figure out what wide receiver is going to do well each week, and then you have a player who has that naturally in his bag. So, I mean, as far as a pick here, I may slot him out a couple of slots, but as far as like wide receivers are going, like he has still, of all the wide receivers left, he's still probably one of the more upside players. He's obviously still a rookie, and like if he does start hitting and become more reliable, right now it looks like Shakir's the number one reliable wide receiver on that team. Shakir's not a huge big play guy where Coleman is, so if Coleman does get a bigger target share, that could work out. But there's definitely a chance that, like he, as you mentioned, Ryan, his stock continues to tumble. But I'm still reserving judgment to get a larger sample size out here. It was a weird game last night too, so
Yeah, it was. So pick 16, we had Ricky Pearsall. We don't need to comment there. Pick 17.
Got that dog in him.
Yeah. Pick 17 was Xavier Legette, who caught 4 of 7 targets for 35 yards. Problem with him is his quarterback is Bryce Young, who completed 13 of 30 passes for 161 yards and 2 interceptions. And it just doesn't look like it's going to get any better. So, pretty good debut for him, I guess, 7 targets, but the team's play is not going to favor him.
The targets are encouraging, but I have to admit that I watched little to none of this game. I was watching Red Zone from the stands, and a lot of the other 1 o'clock games I went back during the week and rewatched some footage of. Not this one, so I'll go to Dave for his take, because I know he was high on him coming into the season. So I'm curious what you think.
Honestly, I'm very encouraged by the targets. I was not expecting him to get this much play, because they're talking about Deontay is going to get all the targets. You still had Thielen from last year, and Xavier Legette led his team with a 24.1% target share, which is crazy. I was not expecting that out. So, like, the fact that they are looking to him and making sure there's plays to get in his hands, and Bryce stinks. We'll get into it. I think the Panthers have to draft a new quarterback next year. Like, it's just not going to work out. And that's obviously going to cap the upside. But of all the weapons that they have from a receiver standpoint, Legette's the only one who can turn these like tiny passes into anything. Like Deontay and Thielen aren't going to go anywhere with this stuff, where Xavier Legette is like a physical like specimen. He's huge, jumps high and fast. So again, I don't think it'll be something you can rely on, but I'm actually really encouraged, where I was concerned that he was going to be a Jonathan Mingo and not do anything. And right now it seems like they're using him. And I think I'm more encouraged by this pick. This pick was a risky pick to begin with, but I'm more encouraged that there's a better floor than I thought.
Yeah, that's fair. Last pick that we're going to go over for our rookie roundup, pick 18, Blake Corum. Not too much to say. Didn't record a single touch. I think there were some speculation that Kyron was potentially going to lose some work to Corum, but week one proved otherwise.
Yeah, there was some coach speak coming out of the game, like, oh, they would have liked to get Corum more involved. They want to give Kyron a little bit of like like lighten his load a little bit, but like that's just not the
How to give Corum off the ball.
it's just not the McVay way, frankly. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to take an L on this one yet. I was a little bit higher on Corum going into the season just because of Kyron's injury history, and
that's what I was just going to say. You're really just hanging on to the fact that Kyron may get hurt, and if he gets hurt, his stock's going to skyrocket.
Yeah, I'm not discouraged. Obviously, the O-line is the thing that makes the running game more concerning overall, but that also probably increases the chance Kyron gets hurt. But yeah, I think it's weird that they didn't use him at all, but I'm still in on him. I have him like everywhere in redraft. He actually got dropped in my Mega Bowl league, and I picked him up right away because he just has still so much upside. And I just don't see any world where he doesn't get mixed in. So I think it's something that they'll gradually start giving him more and more of the workload. But definitely weird that they didn't use him at all week one. But I don't expect this to continue throughout the season.
Yeah,
you know who else got dropped in my Megalo Bowl league that I managed to scoop up? Zach Charbonnet.
Oh, what an idiot!
Yeah, and I put a $15 fab on him. In retrospect, I should have put about 30.
No one went for him.
No, one other guy went for him. Also put 15, and I won on the tiebreak.
Oh my god,
that's a perfect bid.
Yeah, it was right into the starting lineup.
Yeah. How are you doing in Mega Bowl? Sidetrack.
Good. I think I was the number one scorer in my league. My team, honestly, it's probably the best redraft team that I have, which is unfortunate because there's literally nothing. I'm not going to win out of the 20,000 people that are in it, so it's not really for anything. But yeah, my team is legit.
Yeah, mine was pretty solid too. I won week one. I was the third highest score, but week two I have HN and James Cook, so I'm looking like the top scorer this week in my league as well. So
nice.
But anyway, just a little brag session.
Yeah, well, that's it for the rookie roundup. So, Dave, we'll throw it back to you for our regular scheduled programming.
Well, nothing real regular as we're starting the season out right, and I'm mixing around with new segments. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to jump into some player perception check after week one. Few different segments here to see which players that our opinions have changed on. We already talked to about some of the rookies, but other players that maybe our opinions change on after week one. Then we're going to jump into players that we had feelings about and we are reaffirmed in those feelings, and then other ones we're reserving judgment for. But first of all, for you guys, are there any players that after week one your opinions have actually changed just on what you saw on the field, how they're being used or not used in certain situations? So what are you guys thinking?
Oh, yeah, I got to jump in here. Jameson Williams. I'm obviously biased here, but the breakout is here, boys. Yeah. He moved up 36 spots in the Dynasty Keep Trade Cut rankings, and he looked good. Clear wide receiver, too, on an offense that scores a lot of points. Obviously, St. Brown is going to have his games, so it may be a bit of a boom or bust week-to-week type season, but he's in all starting lineups now, and he was basically unstartable last year, so huge turnaround. I think it's for real, and I think the breakout is here to stay.
Yeah, I mean, the usage is the biggest thing. Like, obviously, the stat line was great, but the amount of targets and like how they were using him, I hate him, and I'm encouraged by it. I agree with that.
If we got you saying positive things, then the breakout's here.
He caught the ball. He didn't do that.
Yeah,
he actually caught it. It was crazy. No, but I agree. Like, he's looking like maybe he could actually be something.
Yeah, we'll talk a little more about him later, but and not in the exact same context. But yeah, I mean, as someone who's been in on him all along as well, it was good to see. It was almost tragic because you actually thought that he had like a serious injury at one point there in the game, and I was like, "Oh yeah, are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
But yeah, exciting. So,
what about you, Joe? Any players?
Yeah, I'll throw out a couple that I'm going to take an L on. Taking an L on Joe Mixon. I have no shares of him anywhere, and he looked amazing and got 30 carries. You're going to give anybody 30 carries, then they're going to be fantasy relevant.
Put him in the Houston offense, even better.
Yeah. Obviously, Tyler Lockett taking an L there. I have no shares of him anywhere. You couldn't have paid me to draft him. Ramondre, I was very out on him. I kind of that this L was already kind of taken when they gave him the contract, but they with the usage and how terrible Antonio Gibson looked, it was unfortunate to see. And I think probably the biggest L that I'm taking in week one is just overall on the Cincinnati Bengals for fantasy and for life. I did not end up making this wager, thank the Lord, but I thought all offseason that, the Bengals to win the division at whatever, and it wasn't even that great of a price, like plus 150, plus 175. Like they were like the favorite to the second favorite behind Baltimore. And they just, the defense looked awful. And Joe Burrow, like, I know we're back again. Here we are. What's wrong with Joe Burrow? But like, what's wrong with Joe Burrow? Like, is this just week one? I'm hearing like whispers about the wrist again throughout the course of this week.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just like a thing, and he comes out and they play a good game in Kansas City. They probably will, frankly. But I am concerned, to say the least, about them as a team this year, and hoping to see a little bit better of a performance from them in week one. But my opinion of them as being the old Bengals who made it to the Super Bowl and AFC Championship game is not. That was a bad take, as they say.
Yeah, I mean they got T Higgins on that team, so but
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about his status for this week,
Mike
but
Williams.
that's obviously going to
Mike.
doubtful. Are you just saying he's doubtful?
No, he's doubtful.
He's actually doubtful.
He's doubtful.
Hold on.
He's Mike Williams.
Let me confirm whether he's actually doubtful.
He's actually Mike Williams.
T. Higgins.
While you look that up, Ryan, were there any other guys that you had to change?
Oh no,
Yeah.
he is doubtful.
Yeah, so I threw Kirk Cousins and Drake London in here. Cousins didn't look like himself, and I feel like we're constantly waiting for London to break out. I looked back a little bit to the last 2 years, and London has finished as a top 10 wide receiver twice in 2 full years, and he was being drafted pretty early this year in redraft, and it was supposed to be different with Cousins. I just don't see an incoming top 10 season from him. And I hope Cousins can get back on track, but he is 36 coming off a significant injury. So I don't know. I think Tom Brady playing so well so late into his career kind of made everyone think that these older quarterbacks could just do it forever. And we're kind of seeing it with Rodgers and Cousins that maybe that's not as realistic as we thought. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to turn it around, but I'm not on board as of right now.
I have alarm bells there.
Yeah.
Right now. Because like London flopped.
I feel like we're constantly saying he's flopped.
Yeah, well, Cousins did not look good. He could not throw the ball downfield. He couldn't move. He's definitely doesn't seem like he's fully recovered. So definitely concerned there. You were hoping for a lot more. So we'll see how things go, but I'm not overly optimistic going forward right now.
Yeah.
And we don't like it.
Yeah. I'll throw in one more just because it's injury related as well. J.K. Dobbins, we at least have to say, wow, what a comeback there. We thought he was dead and gone after last year, but week 135 yards on 10 carries, looked pretty good too. Injury concern doesn't go away, but even getting a few weeks out of him was better than we expected after last season. So good to see him back out there.
Yeah. I want to see a little more. I have him in the I'm still reserving my judgment section of this segment of the pod, but
are you throwing him in your lineup week 2?
Only if I have to.
The Panthers, I think, right? I probably am.
Yeah, probably. I think Gus Bus is a buy low.
I agree. I think so too.
I think at the end of the season, I would like, if you were to ask me who I'd rather have for the rest of the season right now, I'd still rather have Gus Bus. And part of that is probably like 10% is just bias against J.K. Dobbins because nobody comes back and is productive from Achilles. And we kind of like saw Cam Akers do this for a little bit, like one good game, and then disappeared off the face of the earth. So I'm,
there. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was only 10 carries. Edwards still had more. I've changed my opinion where I don't think he's useless anymore.
He also still looks like he's running with a limp.
Yeah, well, he broke away and he had no one near him, and he just stopped running and let the defenders catch him. Like, he should have had multiple touchdowns, and he just couldn't like get to the next gear and was just like, yeah, you got me, guys, and kind of just like stopped and like got him multiple times. Like, he ran out of gas.
Yeah,
So like
I'm
I
I'm still more out than in, even for this year, even for the next like 6 weeks.
I think I thought you couldn't use him. I think you can use him. So my opinion is changing that. I do.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. He wasn't on, teams. He would have been on waivers going into this season typically.
I'm not ready to say he's like a top 24, 30 back yet. But now I think there's a path for that potentially, where I was like, this guy could potentially be dropped in a couple of weeks. But no, I don't think that's the case anymore.
Yeah.
I also did have to admit I thought of you guys in the league as I placed Dobbins over 39.5 rushing yards and watched it cash about 7 minutes into the game.
It's good.
All right, Dave, who you got?
I got a couple. I'll run through them quick. So Bryce Young, Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones. More so just the fact that like I am fully out that these guys should not be in the league anymore. Like I thought like they could be potentially useful, maybe have some upside, be sneaky buy lows. No, these guys suck, and you got the franchises need to find ways to move on. This year, nothing the Panthers and Giants can really do. Maybe Locke can come in at some point. Well, I think you got to get Winston in for Cleveland at some point, but yeah. Ramondre, I was already kind of liking him a bit more, but like now I'm like I really think he is like a top 20 back. Ken Walker, I think, might end up being an elite top 10 back when healthy. The guy, I was starting to get more into him about over the last month or so, and he looked incredible. Got hurt. Jin Reed, I actually think is a stud in the making as well. Just like you saw glimpses of it last year. I still had reservations. Obviously, Love is out, but he is like of the Debo mold. He's going to manufacture touches, and I think he's like a number one weapon. So I'm rising a lot on him. I think he's like could be like in Dynasty. I view him as like probably a top 24 wide receiver at this point. I think he's incredible. Diggs, I don't think is dead anymore. And I don't think he's a wide receiver one, but he is like I think he was a team captain week one. He was a clear focal point of the offense. He's not getting the explosive targets, but they're using him in the end zone and they're using him all over. So I think he is going to be a very useful asset this year. Brock Bowers we talked about. Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. I think most people thought the Bucs were going to be the biggest flop of the year. And week one, obviously, they who are they playing? Probably the Panthers again there.
No, Washington. Who also probably has the second worst defense.
So like that could make anyone look good. But I honestly just think Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans are just like perfect match for each other. So the way that Baker throws the ball complements the way Mike Evans plays. So I think both of them are going to continue to be useful. Barkley, I was fading a bit. Wrong. Guy looks elite. And he probably will continue to be elite for a couple of years. CMC, the injuries are a serious issue. I was actually at one point thinking maybe CMC is the RB1 in Dynasty just on the game breaking ability. I am now very concerned. Yeah. Not. The Pollard Spears situation, I know, Joe, you have a different take on this. I was just way more on the Spears side. I am now leaning more that Pollard might be the better asset. I don't think Pollard will be as dominant as he was week one, but I thought Pollard was out and Spears would get I thought Spears was like a very sneaky value. Not as confident in that now. I'm actually thinking Pollard could be the value. And finally, Kelsey looks old. He still has the mind meld with Mahomes, and like when plays break down, he's going to get his, and that's who Mahomes looks to. But when it's just like set plays, it doesn't really seem like they're going to Kelsey on those. He's not getting separation, and he just looks slower. So I don't think he'll probably prove me wrong certain weeks, but I have more reservations that he's going to be an elite option consistently week to week. He will have weeks for sure, but I'm losing the glimmer on the Kelsey asset there.
Agreed on Kelsey.
Agreed?
Yeah, agreed on Kelsey.
Yeah, and on your take that Young, Watson, and Jones should not be in the league. I was someone who, I'll take an L. I thought Bryce Young could turn it around and maybe we'd see a little bit of something in year two, but
yeah, thank God.
It doesn't look like it. Yeah.
Woof.
Yeah, bad. But what about guys that you came into the season having a pretty strong, they're going to be studs, you're feeling really good about it, or players you just knew were going to suck, and after week one, you're going to take that quick victory lap?
Yeah, so I had Josh Allen, which after week two, didn't have the fantasy points in week two, but he just didn't need to do anything in that game.
Oh, yeah.
So I still think he's the man and pumped to have him. CJ Stroud, I was interested to see how he would do in week one after his season last year, and he didn't disappoint, picked up right where he left off, and I think he'll have another great season. And then Dave, you mentioned it, but Saquon Barkley, what a game for him. Yeah, I was curious how he would do on a new team, and he finished as the RB1 for the week, and he was involved in all aspects of the game and scored two on the ground and one through the air. So it looks like he's going to be real involved and should have a really good year.
Yeah, for me, one guy I have in a lot of places that I was a little uncertain about after week one, but now last night feeling a lot better is James Cook. Have him in several leagues, and unfortunately didn't. I lost him in the lottery in another league. But yeah, he looks strong, and um, Travis Etienne, not, and I only have him in one spot, but just bringing him up here because I felt like his usage and everything that I saw from his performance in week one. I know that Tank Bigsby outgained him and had a decent game on the ground, but I think that ETN is still far and away the asset that you want to have on this team at the running back position, and Bigsby is going to be much more of just a handcuff. ETN gets to work in the passing game. He should have scored 2 touchdowns. Um, the ideally there won't be fumbling issues that manifest. It seems like they have the coaching staff in Jacksonville is one of those, like, if you fumble, then your playing time is going to reflect it. So hopefully he gets that worked out. But I'm happy with my Travis Etienne shares and not rushing to acquire Tank Bigsby at this moment. And the Patriots passing offense, I mean, we talked about them last pod. I don't know that I considered drafting anyone. I just there's nothing to be excited about. They don't throw the ball beyond 5 yards down the field. They ran Rondre Stevenson, I think, 25 times. When they do drop back to pass, they check down to their running backs a lot. They have a pretty good defense, so if they're going to actually like try and go out and win games, they're probably going to try and scum the games out. And I just don't really think that you're going to be happy starting any Patriots wide receiver really at any point this season.
I'm going to jump in because I have ETN in this same section for the opposite reason. I was actually been fading ETN. I traded him before last season started. Looked horrible because he was scoring all those touchdowns in the first half, but his value was fully contingent upon scoring touchdowns when those went away the back half of the year. He wasn't a super efficient runner. He got a ton of work then. But even so, this week he was definitely he had 3.7 yards per carry, and I still agree that he is the back to own there. I just don't think he is a high end option at running back going forward. And the Bigsby surprising is they've been talking about wanting to give lighten ETN's load. And if Bigsby can show performances like this, that gives the coaching staff more confidence to give him that workload, which last year they couldn't. They wanted to do it. And literally every time he touched the ball, it hurt the team. Like they threw a target to him twice. I think he got 2 targets, both turned into pick sixes. He fumbled nonstop. So like now that he's showing he can hold the ball and be effective with it, it cuts in the end. What?
I said just one game.
It's one
That's
game.
my hesitation, right?
Yeah.
Like we have the whole evidence of last season where he was not great, and so that's the only reason why at this point I'm still valuing ETN. And I guess if we're like the way that you worded it, which is like a top option, especially from a dynasty standpoint moving forward, like ETN's not a big guy to begin with, and if a lot of his value came from a touchdown standpoint, then I think in redraft, he was kind of falling a little bit this year for people having similar concerns. I probably wouldn't consider him in the top. Well, I'd probably tier 2, high end tier 3 running back, probably tier 2 though. Maybe high end tier 3.
Tier 3. I feel like
Yeah,
tier 3 is a better spot.
very high end tier 3.
But he was like, I think he was like a top 6 dynasty running back going into the year, and because he's of the big producers, like he's on the younger side, like he's much younger,
Yeah,
like than
yeah.
Steve. But I'm more concerned that I don't think he's ever going to be like a top 8, 10 running back consistently. So you're just valuing it based on age. So that's where I'm at. But I know we'll see. It's 1 week. A few other guys.
You've never been wrong on Jaguars before, so
No, and still not. In fact, Trevor Lawrence
Here's our Jaguar expert.
and Brian Thomas Jr. I might as well just get a Jags jersey. I am very excited about Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence. That's where the offense has to run through. But other players, I actually love. I've been loving Brian Robinson all off season. He's one guy who I thought was just undervalued everywhere. And week 1, you saw it, and like he looked like it. He's always been like a solid runner. And honestly, the first half of last year, I think Joe, you talked about it at one point on one of the pods that like he was like the RB4 or something at some point.
Yeah.
But he's going this year. They got Eckler, but he's still involved in the pass game. I think he had like 3 or 4 receptions or something this past week, and that you saw that last year, which is what I like gave me the confidence to be buying him a lot, and to see that carry over in the season is making me pretty confident in him. Nico Collins is still the confirmed alpha wide receiver 1 on the Texans. Neighbors we talked about. Anthony Richardson, just got to tell, like you were hoping he'd be the game breaking stud. He is the game breaking stud. Just stay healthy, but like. I'm more encouraged. Like he definitely had some bad throws. A.D. Mitchell probably should have a couple touchdowns, but he made the crazy touchdown to Alex Pierce that literally no one else could make. But he didn't look that bad as a passer overall. Like he had bad moments, he had unbelievable moments, but I'd say somewhere in the middle, he wasn't that bad. So like that gives me confidence that he can continue to develop there. Javonte Williams, I sold in our league, thank God, so far. So like that one, I feel much. I was actually getting worried going into the season that he was starting to get some hype, and now after week 1, he looked real bad. So I'm like, all right, maybe I did get out from under that. And then finally, I expressed my concerns about Jonathan Taylor because they never played with Anthony Richardson, but you saw the stats. The one game Zach Moss, who was good, played with Anthony Richardson, was not good. And the first game, it's 1 game, but Jonathan Taylor definitely disappointed. He did get a TD, but he was 3 yards per carry, 16-48. Anthony Richardson stole a 4th and goal touchdown away. So I'm not a bad asset, but again, like I have reservation where I don't think he's going to be as great as you expect him to be, just based on how the offense is going to run. But I don't know if you guys have any varying opinions on what I just threw out there.
No, would you rather have rest of season? Jonathan Taylor or ETN?
Probably Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
I think he has big playability more than I think ETN has.
It'd be close for me.
Yeah, I don't think it's like far off, but I think
the Anthony Richardson factor would probably lead me more towards ETN from just like a touchdown upside. And, yeah.
I can see it go either way. I'm basing it on who could blow up more, and I don't see ETN breaking off like too many long runs where like that's a big part of Jonathan Taylor's game is he rips off like 40, 50-yard touchdowns.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what about who are you still reserving judgment for? One I'll throw out there because we already talked about it multiple times is just the Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison situation. Still early, but I'm still reserving personally judgment on Xavier Worthy. We kind of touched upon that too. Don't need to go into it first. And Blake Corum. So basically, the rookies we pass it on the rookies. But who else are you kind of reserving judgment on?
I'll throw out Isaiah Likely. I mean, I like what I see from him. I really do. But I just I'm out on the entire trying to predict the entire Ravens passing attack on a week-to-week basis. There's one league where I have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, and I'm in talks to try and trade them both because I just don't want to like play the game and try and figure out who it's going to be. I think it's going to vary from week to week. I went back and watched all of his routes run, and like probably 80 to 90% of them were like within 6 yards of the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. So like, I'm just holding. He came very close to a 2 touchdown like massive game and he's proven that to be dynamic in the past. In playoff games, he's had big games. Like he's a good player. So that's why I just want to see a little bit more of how the offense is going to function and see if he's going to be a guy that you can count on. I just don't think you're going to be able to really count on anybody but Lamar in that offense, passing wise.
Yeah, I actually agree completely with that. I have Mark Andrews in another league, and I was putting in a bid for Likely because he was on waivers, and I didn't even want to go that high because I didn't want to have to try to decide which one to start every week. I feel like it's going to be a huge up and down, season for both of them. But I'm kind of holding judgment on all tight ends. Week one, the top three tight ends were Isaiah Likely, Foster Moreau, and Brock Bowers. It's not what we expected to happen, and I'm not sold on it being consistent. I think Andrews still gets involved in Baltimore. Like I said, it probably could be an up and down season for both of those guys. And, I need to see a few more weeks to kind of see how the tight ends shake out. We talked about Kelsey not looking that great, but he is still Kelsey. Is that, really going to carry on all season? I don't know. So it's interesting. It's a tough position to, have a consistent starter in.
On the Andrews note, I want to throw out Andy Holloway on the Fantasy Footballers on a Twitter thread. He broke down, watched all the tape on Andrews too, and he was being doubled and triple covered the entire game. And if you look at the last 5 or 6 games the Ravens have played with the Chiefs, Andrews is always taken out. He does nothing against them. So I wouldn't be concerned over Andrews. I don't think there's a full shift in the scheme. This is just the Chiefs know how to take Andrews away and make other people beat him. So that kind of speaks to both your guys' point about reserving judgment and seeing how the Likely Andrews split kind of continues, because that's a big thing I think a lot of people are freaking out about on tight end position. I think they're both great players. I think they're going to be very involved. I think Andrews is still the number one target, but maybe the ceiling's a little bit lower than it was before with now that Likely's emerged a touch. But I think we kind of have to see how another game goes with these two.
Yep, I'm with you. One other guy, I guess I know you're all waiting with bated breath to hear how I feel about Christian Watson, who I put out there on the last pod.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say about Christian Watson. Truly.
I have him too, so I want him to be.
So he should have caught a touchdown on the first drive. He had 2 targets in the end zone the first drive of the game that he should have caught both. One, he was right in his hands. He dropped it. The second one, he was open and Jordan Love airmailed him. And now we've got probably a minimum of 3 and probably closer to 4 or 5 weeks of Malik Willis.
Yeah.
So now it's just with Watson, will he be able to stay healthy, and will he do anything with Malik Willis, or can he just hang in there until Jordan Love comes back? I'm not totally giving up, but it's unfortunate. If you have him, it's, the first half of the season, he might end up on waivers here and there because I don't think he's going to do very much.
Yeah, I could see that.
Not to mention that Jaden Reed is obviously very explosive, and he's going to command more targets as well.
That's exactly my point. When we were grabbing any Packers wide receivers that you knew someone was going to merge, you weren't sure. And after week 1, it seems like Reed's the guy. Reed almost had 3 touchdowns. He should have had 3 touchdowns. I think there was a stupid hold that pulled another one back. So if you're going to be seeing those big explosive targets go to him, it makes it harder for Watson to kind of be the guy. He'll have blowout weeks here and there, but I think he's going to be a very fickled fantasy option going forward.
I'm holding that hope for when Jordan Love gets back. We'll see.
Yeah.
That's why I have him in my reserving judgment. I wasn't ready to sail him off to sea after week 1.
Yeah, I'd wait. If Love comes back in 3 weeks, I think you can survive 3 weeks. And Love likes to spread the ball around a bit, so I think he'll still be useful. One guy who I'm still reserving judgment for, but I need to caveat it, is Will Levis. And let me say it. He looked horrible week 1, really, really bad. I'm not ready to put him in the Bryce Watson DJ tier yet, but he strikes me as a type of player who is going to have a lot of up and down games. There'll be games where he looks unbelievable, and then games he looks when he looks bad, he looks really bad, and that was last week, just making dumb boneheaded plays. But my reserve judgment is I think he'll probably continue to still be the starter, but if he keeps going like he did in week 1, and he actually is playing the Jets this week, so could be bad again. I wouldn't put out of the realm of possibilities that they might actually put Mason Rudolph in at some point, which I did throw this out that like maybe grab him and like I don't know if did you guys hear the quote that the coach said about the offense? Like he literally said, if we punted on the first down of every possession, we likely win that game. If you're saying that, it's like I feel like you could potentially make a change at quarterback, but I'm waiting to reserve judgment that because otherwise, if I had him, I'd be like, I got to jump ship. I'm not doing that yet. I think maybe it'll be okay, but after week one, I would be terrified. But if you have Levis, I get Rudolph because I do think there could be if you're I should say if you're relying on Will Levis. If you don't rely on him, don't make the trade. But if he is like a key piece, you gotta kind of have a contingency plan. Anyone else, guys? Or are you guys ready to go into the next segment?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Excited. Joe,
all right.
Take it
so
away.
It's time, baby. So for the first time formally, we're going to get into our new NSFW Dynasty Podcast sports betting segment. So last week, we had a segment for sports betting that we referred to as the non-guaranteed lock of the week. But this week, we're coming back and we've rebranded. And I'd like to welcome you all into the Joey Bottles prop, parlay, and other potentially profitable pick kitchen. So here, me and the guys are going to offer up our personal menu of bets that we have invested in or will be investing in for the upcoming week. In case you're wanting to ride along with us, in case you're looking for some tips, or maybe it'll help you make some start-sit decisions in your fantasy leagues, or maybe you just want to cheer with us as we throw away our money. So, and then also as the head chef of the kitchen, I will offer up my main course each week, the Joey Bottles same game parlay of the week. But first, you guys might have heard that we recently partnered with BetStamp and Sign Up Expert, opening up an incredible opportunity for you guys to join some of our favorite sports books and get the best odds and even some new user offers. Guys, look, if you're into sports betting, which I sure am, you have to understand that over the long term, getting the best of the number and having multiple outs to shop around is absolutely critical, especially when it comes to prop bets where numbers can vary widely from place to place. And we have a dedicated page over at signupexpert.com/NSFW that can help you do just that. So you head over, you see a nice convenient list of all the sports books that are available. It's senses your geographic location and pulls up all the options that you have. And it shows unique sign-up offerings and bonuses that you can get for each of those books if you're obviously not already an existing member. So if you're going to place the bets anyway, why not get the best of the number? Give yourself the possibility or the highest likelihood of winning. And, if you're ready to take your sports betting game to the next level, show us some love while you do it. Head to signupexpert.com/NSFW to check out what options you have there and enjoy some nice new user bonuses while you're at it. So now on to the segment. And for the segment, I am going to, for this week, Dave and I are going to throw out a couple appetizers, some bets that we have made or are going to make, things that we particularly like for the week. So, Dave, I'm going to kick it over to you. What do you got for us this week?
First of all, I just want to note how awesome is it that we have an ad read, and Joe, that was awesome.
Well done.
I love that I'm in the kitchen. Where do you do your best kitchen, by the way, when you're cooking up some parlay?
When I first wake up in bed on Sunday, I usually roll over on the stomach and grab the phone and put in a couple right there before I even get out of bed. And then I got the two kids at home, so like as it gets closer and closer to kickoff, it's hard for me to like really focus on finding the locks and chefing up good parlays with the kids running around and Paul looking at me. So usually I have to excuse myself to take a shit, and that's where the real magic happens. So.
Right. And I am a frequent diner at this kitchen, I'll tell you that much. But moving forward on some of the picks that I'm taking, throwing them out there. So there's a couple games I like based on the defensive matchups and some players who maybe had not the greatest output in week one. So like one of those is Jared Goff. You thought he'd have a bigger game week 1. He didn't really have it. And because of that, I think the lines are a little bit lower, which that's usually what I look for, a player who maybe had a down week. If they have big weeks the following week, their lines are always juiced. So Jared Goff, he is going to be home, and he's unbelievable at home, and he's playing against the Bucks, and the Bucks secondary is not really that impressive, but their running defense is very strong. So with that, I think that they're going to attack through the air. So actually, I'm going to parlay Jared Goff's over 1.5 pass touchdowns with his over 269.5 pass yards on FanDuel for plus 140. So that's the only parlay I have in there. But if you want a little bit more juice, a little bit better odds, another player who I think is going to have a pretty big game is Derrick Henry. And they're playing the Raiders. They're at home playing the Raiders, and I'm having him over scoring 2 touchdowns at plus 320 on FanDuel. Henry came into the Ravens to kind of ice games, and when they're up, just like dominate. And I think honestly, I would maybe even take his over his rush attempts. He's going to get a lot of work, and I think they're going to be up the whole game. And I do think there'll be plenty of times they're in the red zone, and he's going to be the one getting the touches. So I think he has a good shot at getting 2 touchdowns. And when you get basically 3-1 odds, I'll take that. Another one, Malik Willis. He stinks as a passer, so like he's not going to be throwing a ton. But he is athletic, and I think the only way they'll move the ball is him running. So his rush yards is only at 29.5 on FanDuel at minus 113. Feels a bit low for like that's the only way I think they'll move the ball. So I'm willing to sprinkle a little bit on there. The big one, the one I have the most conviction in, and I know Joey feels the same way, and we alluded to this before, is Malik Neighbors. Basically everything, but really his yards, over 66.5 receiving yards, is minus 113 currently at FanDuel. They're playing the Commanders. We alluded to this before. Their defense stinks, like real bad.
Not good.
It's one of the worst in the league. They spent last year trading all their defensive players away so they could get a higher pick, and it's working. They stink. So Neighbors, I think he's going to torch that secondary. So I am definitely throwing money on the over of his receiving yards. But I forgot how many targets he got this past year week, but he's going to get a healthy. Was it double digits or was
5 catches? I don't know how many targets though.
Seven targets.
7 targets. So I think he'll get more going this week because I don't think Daniel Jones will be under as much pressure. So I think they'll throw the ball more because again, the Commanders' defense stinks. So I would actually take his over receptions at 5.5 for plus 108 so you get a little extra juice there. And hell, I'll even parlay the both of those together, and that gets you plus 128 since there is some positive correlation between that. You won't get crazy odds there. Finally, same game. I'll throw it in there. I mentioned too before, Brian Robinson. I think they keep putting the unders on his receiving yards way too low. I bet this last week it was a smash. I think he had like 40-something yards. Again, the line is only at 11.5 receiving yards and minus 113 on FanDuel. I'm taking it again because until the books catch up, I'm going to keep hitting his receiving yards over. So those are my plays, Joe. How do you feel about them? Anything you like?
Yeah, obviously, when I originally went to put my picks in the doc, I had Malik Neighbors as well. So I'm with you on that one. And I like the Brian Robinson over receiving yards because, it's an opportunity to exploit a defense that's not very good. And if the Giants have anything, it's a half decent front seven. So maybe they will get some pressure on Jaden Daniels, and maybe you see 11 receiving yards doesn't take much. And if you're saying he's involved in the passing game, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So
yeah, he had 49 last week. So
49,
11 and a half.
How many targets?
I think he had like 3 or 4.
4 targets, 3 catches.
Yeah. That's
so
that'll be a bet.
Yeah, that's a
I'm gonna
bet.
put that in there. All right. So for me, I'm gonna stick in that same category. This is probably I don't want to say it's my favorite. I think I like all of these equally, but Rachaad White over 3.5 receptions.
Like your kids, right? Your bets are like your kids. You like to make
Yeah.
No favorites.
I'm giving these all out with equal conviction, but I like Rachaad White in the passing game, and I think that highest implied total of the year. We're going to talk about this game several times. We've already talked about it, and we're going to talk about it again. He gets a ton of work in the passing game, and I think that it's likely to be a game script where they're down. I think the Lions are going to come out and score a lot of points at home, and Baker just is he's chucking the ball. I think his line for over attempts right now is like 36 or 37 and a half attempts. Yeah, it's high. So I just, with the line that high, and I think White had 4 receptions, 4 targets, 4 receptions last week. No, I lied. I think it was 6 targets, 6 receptions last week. So, looking back towards his trending last year, it's not like he's a lock for, 5-6 catches a game, but I do think this is one of those games where the game script will be conducive to him catching balls. So I really like Rachaad White over 3.5 receptions. I also like and bet Isaiah Likely under. I bet under 18.5 longest reception. Widely available is 17.5. I would bet 17.5 too. I bet 18.5, like minus 125, just for the extra yard. Probably a waste, but yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, a lot of his routes were near the line of scrimmage last week, and I don't anticipate this being a game where Baltimore needs to throw the ball a ton or even wants to throw the ball a ton, frankly, coming off of last week. It correlates a little bit with Dave's Derrick Henry 2 touchdown play, which I also like. I think generally speaking, they don't want to throw the ball a lot at like any game. So the one play where Likely went for big yardage last week was a broken play. His initial route on that play was, an 8-yard route that he turned upfield when Jackson got outside the pocket, made a great play, broke about 4 tackles. It was a nice play, but it's not like that was a downfield route for him. And then last, I'm going to go with this is an interesting one. Brock Purdy over 238.5 passing yards is available, but the actual market number, it's more commonly 241.5. This opened lower. I think it opened around like 232.5, and it's actually taken some money over the course of the week. He has good numbers against the blitz. The Vikings blitz a lot. He still threw, I think, a solid 8 yards per attempt last week. Even in a game where first name Jordan Mason ran for 147 yards. He still put up over 200 yards passing last week, and that was also with Brandon Ayuk hardly schemed into the it didn't really seem like Brandon Ayuk was super involved. Didn't do a ton, and I obviously think that'll change this week. So Brock Purdy over 238.5, over 240.5. Yeah, I think the defense, the Vikings defense, presents a good matchup for him, and that's a good look. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I like them all. The unders are ones that are always stressful, but they're always the sharper play. Typically, so the under longest yard reception, and I think that's also really smart because people are going to look at the long touchdown like they had last week, and I think I forgot who looked at the odds, but the odds of him scoring a touchdown play was 0.3%. On there, it was so low. He broke multiple tackles, shouldn't have happened. So, and most of his targets, he's coming out in the flats and it's all short area targets. So the only way he's going over on that really is if he's breaking multiple tackles and getting out there. So I like that play, even though unders always give me the heebie-jeebies, and I like to just pray for the over hope. But that I think that's the smart play, and yeah, it's funny that we're targeting a lot of the same games in there.
Yeah. And now for the main course, we're going to go to the same game parlay of the week, and you're not going to be we
got to get a drop for this, by the way, next time.
Yeah, we do. We're going to get it next time. Maybe something from Ratatouille, or we'll see. More to come.
Yeah, we're going to do this for the meet.
That's a spicy meatball.
That'll be that's a placeholder.
We're going to go back to Detroit. Buccaneers at Lions, highest implied total of the week, 51.5. And we are going to go with 4 legs. The first leg, Rachaad White, over 3.5 receptions, because I like that a lot. So it's in here. Jared Goff, over 1.5 passing touchdowns. Again, right? Dave said earlier, the Buccaneers have a pretty solid run defense. The Lions also have a pretty solid run defense. So Buccaneers seem like they just want to throw the ball. The Lions, are known to run, but I think against the Bucs, they're going to have a lot more success passing. So Goff over 1.5 passing touchdowns. And then I'm taking Amon-Ra St. Brown over. So you could take this two ways. I put in Amon-Ra 100 plus yards receiving. I think it's a get right game for him.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I was strongly considering putting Jameson Williams under in here as well. Nothing against Jameson, but I just kind of feel like his line might be a little inflated by what happened in week one. And, I don't see that many games this season where Jameson outperforms Amon-Ra. Like I said, I think Tampa Bay's down their best cornerback. So I think this is a game where the Lions are going to pass a ton, and there's projected to be a lot of points. And not for nothing, but these guys know Amon-Ra had a down week one. So I just think this is going to be a big week for him. You could also, if you want to be less risk forward or less risk averse, more risk averse, you could play Amon-Ra's over receiving line, which is just 81, 82.5 right now. So it's not that much more egregious going up to the 100. And I wanted the boost to the odds. And then last leg, like Dave mentioned earlier, Mike Evans over 67.5. I think this is a good matchup for Mike Evans. I think that Baker throws to him a ton. I think there's a lot of attention going to Chris Godwin this week because Chris Godwin was getting a ton of targets. He had 6 targets last week. I think he caught them all. They were mostly slot targets, though. And I think Mike Evans' game-breaking playability, the Lions gave up like the second most explosive passing plays in the league last year. So Mike Evans, I think he's a good look. So 4 legs, Rachaad White over 3.5 receptions, Jared Goff over 1.5 passing touchdowns, Amon-Ra St. Brown 100 plus receiving, and Mike Evans over 67.5 receiving. That'll get you anywhere from 10 to 12 to 14 to 1, depending on where. When I originally put it in, I was on Bet365. It was showing 14 to 1, then it ticked down to 12 to 1 right before I locked it in. But I checked FanDuel 10 to 1, DraftKings 10 or 11 to 1. So, like I said earlier, this is another plug to shop around. If you have a couple different apps, put the parlay in all the apps, see which one pays you out the best odds. And, that's where you want to take it on. And if you have obviously profit boost somewhere.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah,
that makes it more appealing as well.
Each app has different boosts that are available, so definitely see what's there too to maximize those odds.
Yeah,
a lot of overlap between the two of you on what you like this week. It makes me a little more confident in your guys' picks here.
I mean, I feel pretty good. I'm a sous chef, if you will.
We didn't talk about it beforehand either, so it's actually nice to see that we're aligned and let's
similar
get that
process. Right. It's gonna be a big week, boys. Big week.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, great segment. Let's make some money for the league and all our listeners. And then finally, we're gonna finish up. Give a little quick update on our NSFW Dynasty League. So now that we're back in the league, one thing that our league does that I think is kind of unique and kind of fun is that each week we track the weekly high and the weekly low. A lot of people may do that, but what we do is whoever scores the highest points in any week for the full year gets a payout, the title. The lowest score of any week ever has to pay off for something for the toilet bowl. So it's kind of a fun little event that we keep track of throughout the year. And in week one, now that we're in here, the weekly high is our very own Wilkinson bros. Ryan Wilkinson over here. He scored just over 161, 161.4. So not a crazy high one, but a good starting point. So I like that. I mean, it's a bar I think we could potentially break at some point, but Ryan must feel pretty good. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, feeling great after week one. I agree with you. I don't think it's going to stand the test of time, but it's definitely a good starting point. And compared to the first week we had last year when we put up the lowest score that lasted until like week 13 or something.
Yeah.
We're feeling real good going into the season.
It lasted till week 13. That is exactly right. You actually scored nearly 100 points more this week, this year than you did the same week last year. And the low score this year is a team we probably get. No, I'm kidding. Clarksville came up short. Their quarterbacks did not step up, and that is the inherent strength of their team that we thought. So they don't come through.
Brock Bowers wasn't enough to carry them out of the cellar.
Yeah, it was carrying that limp body across
That 8
the finish
targets
line.
and 50 yards was just
But
not enough.
I will say it's not an egregiously low score. It was 88.08. So I do
Oh, yeah,
expect
they'll be much worse than
they'll
that.
be
Yeah, that'll
significantly
get
worse.
beat. Yeah.
I think that would probably. I think when looking at last year, I think of the 14 weeks, I think like 11 of the weeks were worse than that. So I don't expect that to stand, but
That's
nice
pretty
fun
respectable.
starting point. Yeah, that's a respectable. Everyone did decent last week. But yeah, and then we also had actually today a pretty big boy trade in our league, and I want to get you guys' thoughts on it. I'm pretty excited about it for both sides of it, but I'll run through what the trade is. So Cannell's in our league. He received Malik Neighbors and Marshawn Lloyd, and Schluter received Brandon Ayuk, a 2025 first, 2026 third, and Matty Rosinski's 2025 second, which is currently trending to be potentially an earlier pick on how the first 2 weeks are going. So how are you guys feeling about that trade? What's your breakdown?
So
Go ahead.
honestly, I actually would lean Schluter's side here, and I have a feeling the two of you are going to take the other side. But Malik Neighbors, he has Daniel Jones right now. Ayuk, is proven. And then I don't know. I just feel like the value with the 2025 first and the 2025 second makes up for any difference, even if you think Neighbors is going to end up better than Ayuk. Ayuk is still a really, really good receiver. So personally, I would take Schluter's side of it.
Yeah, I lean the Schluter side as well. I definitely think this trade favors him, but not by a wide margin. I have strong conviction that he won the trade 60-40. And when you factor in that Chris is getting Malik Neighbors and he's a Giants fan, then that's enough for me to tip the scales. So, it's pretty even. Like you said, the draft capital really makes a big difference. Ayuk is proven. He's in a good offense. He just got extended for a couple years. So Malik Neighbors, we have hopes and dreams that he turns into an incredible wide receiver, and he very well may. And frankly, there's Marshawn Lloyd is not a nothing asset either, to be honest. And I think with Green Bay cutting A.J. Dillon, or A.J. Dillon going on the IR, they probably could have cut him. But A.J. Dillon going on the IR and Josh Jacobs not being the healthiest back of all time. Lloyd was out. He was injured week 1. But actually, he could be a pretty solid running back asset. So I would lean Schluter because of the draft capital, but it's pretty close. I think it was a pretty fair and good trade on both sides.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. I definitely lean Schluter as well. I love Neighbors, as everyone knows, and like someone he talked to about trading to me as well, but I wasn't going to give what he was asking for. But I think Neighbors has the upside to be something incredible, but he does have serious quarterback concerns where Ayuk is going to be tied to Purdy for a long time. So like there's like to me like Schluter's getting a very very safe floor. Like where you're going to get there, and he potentially just as much upside. Neighbors, if all things click, I think is going to be better, but you need everything to click. There, where like Ayuk's already in a situation where he could be a top 7 wide receiver for years to come, especially next year if Debo happens to leave and their cap situation gets pretty tight. And then you get the draft capital on top of it. Where like Marshall Lloyd could be something, but he also fumbles a ton. So he's getting hurt. He had a really bad offseason, and he fumbled a lot in college, and he'd been fumbling in the preseason. And like he could be explosive, but we're very excited about AJ Dillon, and that didn't work out in Green Bay as well. So like he's not a nothing asset, I agree, but I personally rather have picks, in my opinion, than Marshawn Lloyd. I think is kind of where I would get at that, just to kind of re-roll the dice on him. But he could certainly get the opportunity. If for some reason he gets the starting job at Green Bay, then I think this scale is kind of tipped back to Cannell's. But also, we've said this before, when you're making a trade and there's players you want, you typically I wouldn't call this like a real overpay, but you definitely paid a little bit more just to get it who you want. And that's how you get trades done often. Like you can't worry about like, oh, this is exactly even, or like a trade calculator that says I'm set. Like, don't worry about like winning the trade or getting right and even. You can use those calculators to make sure that you're not setting something offensive. Is really kind of how I go about trade calculators. Like, it just do like the normal person think I'm in the ballpark here. But typically, if you want to get someone, especially an elite guy like Neighbors, who's a rookie and people are very attached to that, you have to pay a little bit up to make that happen. So I'm fine with what Cannell's paid. I do think as a result, Schluter got the better value, but I think it makes sense when you're trying to get players like this.
Yeah, gotta go get your guy.
I agree.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other key matchups? How are you guys trending after one day in your matchups going into the weekend?
Well, I started Josh Allen, who didn't do great, but was playing Coleman, who put up a dud. So not a bad start.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
I'm going to be in a dogfight with Adam, who I'll be in Atlantic City watching the games with on Sunday. So right now we're projected within 2 points of each other and are both 0-1. So big matchup. You're going down.
And I'll be playing my neighbor in Crope. I got off to a decent start. HN and Tyreek did not do much for him, and then Walker got hurt for him. So like things are trending my way right now. This is how I ended up doing well at early season last year. So I'm just like, my team plays great defense, and/or I let their team get hurt too. I'm not putting up massive scores, but just surviving in advance and just trying to get through.
It's the name of the game.
So trying to make that happen again, but hopefully, any other parting words for you guys with the league? But hopefully, I get this win because I really need it.
Now let's get to week 2.
Yeah, nothing for me.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for listening. I know it's a marathon, a lot of content on a Friday for us celebrating, but good luck in your week 2 matchups and get it done.
Of the NSFW Dynasty podcast. Tune in next time